Well, Profits, thanks for joining me today. I'm Rob Skudovic. We have Ryan and Christian here. And so we're going to have another video. We're going to call it our sleeper video part 2. We did a part 1, got a lot of traffic, a lot of feedback. But we're not just doing a second video because we had a lot of views. I think it's fundamentally important, and if you're going to win your fantasy league, you need to take chances. Inevitably, you're most likely going to have injuries, a player's going to underperform, you're going to have bye weeks, things like that, and so you need to understand your sleepers. So that's what we're going to cover today, some guys that we think you need to keep an eye on, that we think can have a breakout year, that you can probably get later in the draft that might slip, or even go undrafted. So these are some guys to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think a lot of times people go into the season and, okay, I have 2 or 3 fantasy sleeping wide receivers and a couple of running backs, but you can't just have those guys because inevitably some of your sleepers are going to get taken. You have to have so many, and you have to really stack just in case things happen.
Yeah, I think it's important too. One of the things we say, one of the biggest mistakes in fantasy is people leaving dead weight on their bench. I don't care how good your team is. I don't care how good your starters are. Never leave dead weight on your bench. I saw it a couple years ago. In fact, I made the mistake myself. I had Le'Veon Bell and I had Jamal Charles. They're very good running back, and this was a few years ago. And then in the same week, or within the week of each other, they both got injured, were out for the year. And I remember earlier that year, there's actually some running backs I thought about throwing on my bench, but I thought, you know what, I'm probably fine. I don't need them. I didn't act on it. Well, sure enough, 2 weeks later, I'm desperate for guys. So don't leave dead weight on your bench. Always be looking to improve your team, and one of the ways you do is through sleepers.
Absolutely.
So here we go. Let's get it started.
All right. So the first guy we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about Kenny Golladay. Here's a guy that I'm pretty excited about, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. I think he could have a pretty good year this year. First of all, a lot of questions people have about the system. First of all, Matthew Stafford is a good quarterback. He throws 28 touchdowns very consistently, 28, 29, 30. Very good quarterback. On pretty bad defense, throws the ball a lot, really like that. Sure, Golden Tate and Marvin Jones there, but they're really just PPR specialists. Neither of them are huge on touchdowns. They are not huge on yards. They get a lot of short catches, but that's mostly what they do. I like that they lost Eric Ebron. Their tight end situation isn't great. I think there's definitely a role for Kenny Golladay. The question is, does he have the talent? And I absolutely think that he does. Last year was his rookie year, and he had a fairly good year for a rookie. Came out week 1, 4 catches, 69 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And he looked awesome. And some people kind of jumped on that train, the Kenny Golladay train or whatever, thought he was going to have a great year, and it didn't really work out. And now they're probably pretty hesitant. But he struggled with injuries all year. Had quite a few just average games, missed a game here and there. But finally, his last game that he played, he had 80 yards and a touchdown again before he ended up getting hurt again. But he looked very talented, really fit into that system well. Again, his stats weren't unbelievable, but he struggled with injury, and that being said, he was fairly consistent and get a couple of catches and about 45, 50 yards every week. So I think that this year he can really work into a better role. I think he can be a good option, though it may take a few weeks.
Yeah, I like Kenny Golladay. I think that he benefits, one, playing with a good quarterback there. You said on average he's been pretty solid. I also think he's going to benefit from the fact that right now they don't have a really solid running game. They brought some guys in, brought Blunt, they drafted a rookie Johnson there. They might make a difference, but ultimately they don't run the ball very well there. I think he's very talented. He showed that last year, battled some injuries like you said, and he's young. But the whole idea with sleepers, if he was a guy that had a really great season, he wouldn't be a sleeper. So the idea is you have to begin to look at guys like this and begin to really to you kind of become a prognosticator of what you think he's going to do. So I like him.
Yeah, and you definitely talked about it there. They lost Eric Ebron. They took a definite step back with a guy like Luke Wilson versus Eric Ebron. Luke Wilson was in Seattle. He never really had a connection. I mean, they brought in Jimmy Graham to kind of be that tight end in Seattle because Luke Wilson just wasn't showing them anything. And now to lose Eric Ebron and downgrade to Luke Wilson, there's going to be targets out there for somebody. And with Kenny Golladay being healthy this year, assuming his health is going to stay the way it's at, he's going to have a pretty solid season. Now, the running game, they have 6 running backs there. By the time the season starts, they're going to whittle it down, and some of those guys are probably not going to have the job, but the targets are definitely going to be there for Golladay. He did show some speed and explosive in game 1 last season, and like you said, he came back after all the injuries and had a great year, or a great final game with 80 yards and a touchdown, so I agree with that.
All right, yeah, so we'll move on and talk about our next. Rob, you're up to talk about Robbie Anderson.
So Robbie Anderson, so right now his ADP or average draft position, he's currently the 43rd wide receiver taken. So kind of put that in perspective for us out there. If you're in a 12-team league that starts 3 wide receivers, which is very standard, 12-team league is about it. There's a lot of 10-team leagues. So a 12-team league that starts 3 wide receivers, that means that all their teams have drafted all 3 of their started wide receivers, 36, plus an additional 6 before this guy's coming off the board. So that kind of puts that in perspective for us. He's got a lower floor because he has some question marks. And really his question marks are not maybe skills and ability, but he had some off-the-field issues this offseason. Got arrested, speeding tickets, some other things going on there. But from all reports, the team feels like he's moved past that, and those are going to be a non-factor. Okay. But with that said, and I want you to hear me clearly on this, this guy's ceiling is very high. He has wide receiver 1 potential and can easily be a wide receiver 2. At 6'3", he's got good height. He's athletic, fast. He's quick. Here's some of the notes coming out of the combine when he was drafted. Here's what they said his strengths are. Went on to say he has tremendous ability to climb the ladder and snatch the pass at its high point. He has excellent balance, body control to make a circus catch. He plays faster than his time speed and has short quickness, which gives him the ability to get separation in routes. Now his weakness has been that he's a little undersized. He's 6'3", was only 190 pounds. They're worried about his smaller frame, so that's obviously a concern there. If you look at other wide receivers, you look at Antonio Brown and guys like that, they're not particularly big, and he's been able to stay healthy and be productive. Now, in a 5-game stretch last year, he averaged during a 5-game stretch 7 catches, 98 yards, and 1 touchdown per game. He's wowed at the OTAs. The coach has said he's doing great right now. He's really developed. He's taking it to what they feel is that next step to become their number 1 wide receiver. In fact, you look at Coach Bowles, he said this. From a mental standpoint, as far as the pre-snap reads and understanding the game better, he's improved so much in that area. He's not just using his speed anymore. He's more of a complete receiver, more than just a speed guy. He's taken the next step as far as understanding what's happening, how guys are attacking him. He's been working on that all offseason. I love to hear that from a player, that he's working hard in the offseason. He's putting his time in. I think that's huge. And so I think that he's going to benefit also from the fact that I estimate the Jets are going to be playing from behind a lot this year. They're not a very good team. They're in a rebuilding year. They surprised a few people last year, but undoubtedly they're going to be playing from behind. That's a lot of garbage time stats. Now, his second-year stats, he progressed very nicely. In fact, in his second year stats, he finished with 63 catches, 941 receiving yards, and 7 TDs. And I think that's important to remember. Those are really good numbers on a really bad Jets defense. Last year, the Jets were 28th in the NFL as far as offense goes. And he was playing with really an overachiever at McNown at quarterback. I think this guy could be a huge steal. Keep an eye on Robbie Anderson. Any thoughts, guys?
All right, that's a solid pick. I guess my only concern would be we'll see how the quarterback play is, but I think that's about it. Ryan, I think you're up for your guy now. So you can talk about Derek Carr.
Yes, Derek Carr, Oakland Raiders. With Derek Carr, last season he was injured. The season before he broke his leg. Coming back from injuries, Derek Carr seems to be fully healthy, ready to go this year. 2016, he was on pace for 30 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, and 4,200 yards. He really had an MVP type of season that year with the Oakland Raiders. They do have a strong offensive line. He was sacked only 16 times in the entire season. So losing a guy like Michael Crabtree, who he had a real connection with, he did bring in, the Raiders brought in Jordy Nelson this year. John Gruden has been known as a quarterback guru, and he's going to bring things back to the Oakland Raiders days of old. They do have Doug Martin and Marshawn Lynch in the backfield. So he's got a solid running game as long as the offensive line can get them the yardage. With Jordy Nelson coming in, he's one of those guys, they've talked about moving him to the slot. With Jordy Nelson in the slot, he's getting 3.5 yards of separation on average last season, whereas the league average was only 2.8. So he's getting separation between himself and the corners or the linebackers. And if they can move him around to the slot, he's going to thrive. Now, on the outside, when Jordy was on the outside, he was only getting 2.4 yards of separation. That's below the league average of 2.5. So a little bit of next level stats there for you. If they move Nelson to the slot, they're going to be able to open things up a little bit better. They have Martavis Bryant there now. He can really stretch the field. Amari Cooper is one of my booms for this year, as you've seen in our past video. So Derek Carr is really on the pace to have an amazing season, fully healthy. After breaking his leg in 2016, he came back 2017, week 4, and broke 3 bones in his back. Now, the problem with that, he was scheduled to miss 4 weeks, and he came back after just missing 1 game and admitted throughout the end of the season that he really wasn't feeling the greatest. He wasn't ready to come back. He was never really 100% healthy, and now coming back 2018, he's ready, he's healthy, he's good to go. Now, he's had 30 touchdowns once in his career. Like I said, in 2016, he was on pace for 30 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. So he's the negatives on Derek Carr is he's not really a rushing quarterback for fantasy purposes. But when you're getting a guy that's going to throw you 30 touchdowns, keep his interceptions low, throw well over 4,000 yards, once you get him in fantasy, you're looking at a top 12 guy for sure. So he should be a starter in a lot of fantasy leagues this year, assuming the health stays where he's at.
Yeah, I like Derek Carr. I don't know where his average draft position is, but I agree with everything you're saying there. I think he's going to be a great player this year. He was really trending upwards the first 3 years in the league, and then last year he took a step backwards, but it was his injuries and also injuries to Amari Cooper. Looking before the injury last year, 3 of the first 4 games he had a quarterback rating of over 100. So, man, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's a rebound year for him. I think a lot of people are going to overlook this guy, and so you wait, load up your bench or load up your team with the running backs, wide receivers, you take him. I think you're going to be just fine. I agree.
Well, and the thing with Derek Carr is his attempts went down every single year so far in the NFL. He went from 599 down to 573, 560, and 515 last year being injured. But with that, his yards were going up. So his yards per attempt has increased over every season that he's played in the NFL. And something else that you mentioned, the quarterback rating. His quarterback rating has also increased. So I think he's on pace to have a great season this year.
All right. That sounds pretty good. Pretty in-depth research. Solid quarterback rating there. Now I'm going to talk about DeAndre Foreman. He's a guy I think that we're all pretty excited about, actually. I think that he could have a very solid season for a few reasons. First of all, he's young, 22 years old, 6'1", 233, a big, physical, solid runner, has no issues with holding onto the football, so we got those kind of sort of question marks out of the way. Oftentimes with fantasy, the question is just simply, do they have an opportunity to play enough to make a difference, to play enough to get enough fantasy points? And he certainly does. Lamar Miller was just brutal last year. 3.7 yards per carry and only 3 touchdowns throughout the entire season. That's terrible. They absolutely are looking for their next guy. And I think that Foreman is the guy. Again, he plays for a good offense. I like that Watson's going to be coming back, and that passing game will be doing enough to keep him from getting a lot of pressure. I think that he's going to be the guy and get the main carries, and I'll tell you why. They started to slowly work him into that role. He had some on and some off games and didn't really explode until didn't really have a chance to explode because of injury, but his last game he really started to show some signs. He had 10 carries for 65 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's 6.5 yards per carry, plus 3 catches for 15 yards, and that was then he got injured in that game. So I think that he definitely has the talent. I think that a really good sign is that they didn't go out and sign or draft a running back in free agency. They went out and shored up their offensive line a little bit. They got some guys on defense, but I think that they're fine. After how bad Miller played, it's obvious that they need a different guy to come in and fill that role. And the fact that they didn't go out and look for anyone says that Foreman is the guy. I think that he could have a very solid season at running back. He's not a big guy as far as catching out of the backfield, but he's a physical runner. I wouldn't be surprised if they move that ball down the field passing a lot and then just use Foreman a lot to get a lot of rushing touchdowns. I think that he's going to be very Melvin Gordon-ish.
Yeah, I like Foreman. What's not to like about him? I think the only concern I have is he going to recover from his Achilles injury? And we're going to monitor that. We'll keep you updated, of course. But if he comes back, this is clearly his team in the future. Lamar Miller, like you said, every year I think I went back last 4 consecutive years has had a decline in his yards per carry. Once again, they need a guy like Foreman to step up. I think this is year as long as he's healthy and ready to go.
Yeah, I was definitely high on Foreman. The only concern I have is the Achilles because historically running backs that injure their Achilles have not come back with the strongest season after. So that's the only concern I have. But I was really high on Foreman last year as well.
All right. So now we're going to talk about Josh Doctson.
So I'll look at Josh Doctson. So the third-year wide receiver for Washington. He's a former first-round pick, 22nd overall. A lot of people don't realize or they forgot he was a first-round pick. Currently, his average draft position is 53rd wide receiver being taken, so that's very late. This guy can fall far. Now, the team needs and really wants him to become the number one guy. He needs to make a step forward. He needs to fill some shoes there. They're hoping that he can do that this year. I think a lot of people overlook him because he's been relatively quiet the first 2 years, but there's been a reason why he's been quiet. So he played just 2 games as a rookie due to reoccurring Achilles tendon injuries. I'm talking about the Achilles. So that his first year he only played 2 games. He had that injury. He pulled a hamstring last August, and that further slowed his development. Now he finished 2017 with 35 catches, 502 yards, and 6 TDs. This is the first offseason he's been fully healthy heading into the year, so that bodes well for him. Coach Jay Gruden said he praised Doxson's route running ability, and during the last 3 weeks of the organized team activities, he's really impressed with what he's done and how he's improved as a wide receiver. He's got good size at 6'2", 206 pounds. Now Richardson they brought in. Richardson has potential. You look at Crowder. I think Crowder's a solid wide receiver. With that said, none of those guys are legitimate number one wide receivers. Those guys all have lower ceilings. Josh has the ability to become the team's number one wide receiver. He has that sort of talent. So coming out of college at the Combine, here's kind of some of the notes they had, some of the strengths that they had. Just kind of tell you who he is. Coming out of college, says he has the mentality of a lead wide receiver. He runs silky vertical routes with the ability to make subtle shifts to get past the corner, wanting to put hands on him. He's constantly in play speed. He's a good accelerator off the starter step release. He's able to create late separation down the field with body lean and quiet hand usage. Touchdown maker who has run up 25 receiving touchdowns over the past 2 years in college despite missing 3 games. He climbs the ladder to grab balls that are at its highest point. He's got good body control. He uses his hands well, help him to secure catches through contact. Has the ability to make defenses play after the catch, and isn't overwhelmed by physical cornerbacks. So that's just kind of what he says. You hear some of these notes, you see him, and there's a reason why he was drafted in the first round. This guy's got ability. Now, his biggest weaknesses, very similar to Anderson, he needs to put more muscle on so that he can handle some of the more physical cornerbacks in the league. But that's something that he can certainly do and has done and has worked at in the last 2 years. Now, if you look at last year, the first 7 games, his targets per game were 3.14. But the team made a concerted effort in the last 8 games. His targets doubled to 7, so they're really making an effort to get him more involved in the offense. His 6 touchdowns was solid. He made a lot of athletic catches last year, and so I think he's a guy that's got the potential. He's a guy that we definitely need to keep an eye on. So I'd watch this guy. If he stays healthy, this could become a very nice year, a year that he kind of comes out and really establishes himself as a legitimate wide receiver threat in the NFL. He's a guy that I think you need to watch as a sleeper, Josh Doctson.
Yeah, with Doctson, he really attacks the ball up in the air. You know, he goes up and gets it. And with guys like Jamison Crowder there, you got Vernon Davis, you have Jordan Reed, Chris Thompson coming out of the backfield. There are a lot of different options there for Alex Smith to throw to, and he doesn't make mistakes. He's always been a guy with a high percentage, so he's going to go to the open guy, but there's really not an opportunity to double anybody in that offense with so many weapons. So he's going to have a lot of single coverage, it seems like, and I've been really high on this guy too. It's just been unfortunate with the injuries. So I feel like Doctson's going to have a good year this year.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you can't really qualify is, unless you really watched him play last year, just some of his catches, they were just so athletic. It's really hard to explain that, but he just had some crazy catches last year. So I think that bodes well for him. He's very, very talented. But let's go on and we'll talk about the next guy. Ryan, you're up to talk about Ronald Jones Jr.
Yeah, Ronald Jones Jr., drafted this year, 20-year-old. He'll be 21 by the time the season starts. Drafted by the Tampa Bay Bucks in the second round. The one thing that the Bucks have looked to do is Peyton Barber was their starter last year for a good portion of the season, and that guy he's just kind of lackluster when it comes to running the ball. He only had a 3.18 yards after close, which is ranked as one of the lower ones in the NFL. Now, Jones, coming out of college, has been known as kind of a speed and aggressive accelerator. So once he hits that hole, he gets a burst. If he gets into the second level, he can really juke guys. So he's kind of a bigger back. He only ran a 4.48 40. I mean, that's good, but it's not the greatest when you're talking about guys with these lightning speed. He's 5'11", 205 pounds. So he's kind of right around the average for a back. He's not a big bruiser, and he's not really, one of those small guys like Darren Sproles or anything like that. But with Jones, over the course of his college career, he he chose to forego his senior season, but from his freshman year to his sophomore year to his junior year, he increased his yards every single season, and he also increased his touchdown. With his junior year, he had 1,550 yards and 20 touchdowns in only 13 games. So the Bucs went up and they drafted a running back high. They knew what they wanted, and with a guy like Ronald Jones, he came out of the combine as one of the top 3 running backs behind only Barkley and Darius Geis. So Jones is set up to have a pretty solid year there, and he's got a clear path to the number 1 running back job.
Yeah, you said a clear path. Christian, you mentioned earlier. I agree. Half the battle in fantasy is opportunity, and I think he's in a prime opportunity that if everything goes well, I think he'd be successful. I think Peyton Barber is not going to be the long-term answer there. One concern at 205 pounds is not small, he's not big, but he's got a lot of skills, a lot of ability. He's got a high ceiling.
Yeah. All right, yeah, that's pretty solid. So now I'm going to talk about Tyrod Taylor. And here's why. First of all, the reason I wanted to put a quarterback in this video, because we always talk about wait on a quarterback, don't take these guys early, and that's all good and dandy, but we need to find a way to get talent late then. So I think that looking for sleeper quarterbacks is very, very important. And I think that Tyrod Taylor is one of them. Currently he's being taken very late in drafts. And I understand why. His career hasn't been fantastic. In fact, it wasn't very good at all for Buffalo, but he played for a bad Buffalo offensive line with no receivers. It was a terrible situation. I'm very excited to see who he can do now that he's playing for the Cleveland Browns, which isn't something you would normally say about a player, especially a quarterback. But here's why. He has great weapons in Jarvis Landry, Josh Gordon, David Njoku, and Corey Coleman for wide receivers. They have a plethora of running backs now. They will find one of those guys will figure it out somehow. I like Duke Johnson, had like 80 catches last year, something insane like that. So he definitely has the weapons around him. They actually have a fairly good offensive line. We talk about Jarvis Landry as a PPR machine. If you watch some of our other videos, we love Josh Gordon. When he can get on the field, when he stays out of trouble, he has such a high ceiling, so talented. David Njoku is a very talented tight end as well. What I also like is that he's the best quarterback the Browns have had in years. You can bet that they are going to use him as much as they can. And then finally, here's another reason why they're going to use him a lot. They had the 29th defense last year, and they didn't make any major improvements this offseason that really tell me that they're going to go from 29th to a good offense. Like, they're going to be a bad defense this year. They're going to need to throw the ball a lot. And they had the 22nd run game last year. One thing that is really underrated, they brought in a lot of running backs, but that offensive line is primarily a pass blocking offensive line. They really struggle in the run blocking game. So I think all of these things bode well for Tyrod Taylor. I think he's going to have a good season. I don't think he'll have a very efficient season, but I think he'll have a lot of chances.
Yeah, I know some people are thinking about what a Baker Mayfield. Now, the head coach has come out many times and publicly stated that his quarterback this year is Tyrod Taylor. I'm not a Tyrod Taylor fan, honestly. I thought he had some brutal years there. But then I have to remember, he played in a very bad offense. He had no weapons around him. It's hard to judge him with the system that he's in. Now he goes to Cleveland. It's undeniable. These guys have a ton of weapons there. Mm-hmm. I think he's a huge sleeper. I think you're right. They're going to have to play from behind a lot. I think about Blake Bortles a couple years ago, who ended up throwing for 34 touchdown passes. And the reason why is back then Jacksonville's defense was brutal. And so garbage time stats, it doesn't matter when they get the numbers, it all applies at the end. I think you're right. He could be a huge steal.
Yeah, Bortles that year actually led the league in fourth quarter quarterback yards and touchdowns. But with Tyrod Taylor, another guy you have to watch out for is their fourth-round draft pick, Chris Callaway. They're saying that he could actually come up and challenge Corey Coleman for that third wide receiver spot. They also just gave Duke Johnson Jr. another big contract. They signed him 3 more years for another $15.6 million. So they really like him there. He does catch a lot of balls out of the backfield. They could move him out into the flats, into the slots. So he's got a lot of weapons around him. I've been really high on Tyrod. And, Baker Mayfield scared me for a minute, but now, like you said, Hugh Jackson's come out and said that Tyrod is his quarterback, so he's going to have a pretty solid season. So don't be afraid of drafting Tyrod.
So now we're going to talk about you have Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, so I got Ben Roethlisberger. So he's not kind of prototypical sleeper. It's kind of weird because, one, everybody knows who he is. He's not going to sneak up on anybody. So why am I talking about this guy as a sleeper? It doesn't seem a bit odd, right? Well, I put him in the sleeper category because it's ridiculous how low his draft position currently is. Now, about a month ago, his average draft position was low, and it's gotten lower as time's gone. I don't know why people are souring on this guy. It's ridiculous. He's currently the 15th quarterback taken overall, with quarterbacks like Rivers, Matt Ryan, Andrew Luck, and Jimmy Garoppolo taken ahead of him. Let's think about that for a second. So, Philip Rivers lost Henry and Gates. Okay, and that defense is really good. A lot of Rivers' success in years past was a lot of the garbage time statistics, which we just talked about. But they don't have to throw the ball a lot, and you mentioned it before in a video, Christian. That defense, it plays really well. He doesn't have to throw the ball 40, 45 times a game to be successful. You also look at a guy like Andrew Luck, who still hasn't thrown the football yet. He missed all of last year. His rehab, they're saying, is going fine, but he hasn't picked up a football yet. That's concerning. He's going ahead of him. And Luck doesn't have great weapons around him. Matt Ryan, besides his MVP, he's only averaging 25 touchdown passes per season. That's not bad. That's quality. It's not great, though. Jimmy Garoppolo looks like he's going to be the quarterback of the future. I like Jimmy Garoppolo, but he still hasn't proven himself over a long period of time. And his best weapons are Garcon and Goodwin. So all these guys are taken before Ben. I just don't quite understand. I think he's being overlooked in many drafts. And I think the reason why is we're in a society that they're always looking for the flavor of the week, the newest thing. So we get enamored with new players like Goff and Watson and Mahomes and other guys like that. And then Ben gets overlooked, which is fine. Go ahead and overlook him in my drafts because I'll take him later on and I'll be happy to roll with that. A lot of people don't realize that since 2012, the last 6 seasons, Ben Roethlisberger's per game statistics extrapolate over 16 games turns out to be 31 touchdown passes per year. The last 4 years, he's averaged 298 passing yards per game, so he's just under that 300 mark per game average. It's phenomenal. Now you add to the fact that he's got great weapons. I mean, take Juju Smith-Schuster, 21-year-old stud. This guy had 907 receiving yards last year in only 13 games. Then you add to that, he's got one of the greatest receiving running backs of all time, and Le'Veon Bell's got great hands out of the backfield. And he's got a Hall of Famer, and I believe the #1 wide receiver in the NFL, currently Antonio Brown there. So there's no reason why this guy doesn't easily get 28 to 32 touchdown passes this year. And if everything goes well and he stays healthy, it could be a career year for him. He's fallen way too far in mock drafts. He's taken, like I said, about the quarterback range, about 13 to 15. Let him slip, grab him later, build your defense, or build your bench, build some of those positions that you need, like running back and wide receiver. And you take him later on, he's a safe pick. He's got a high floor and a very good ceiling. Once again, he's a sleeper for me because I'm just shocked at how far this guy has fallen, who's been proven time and time again in the NFL.
Yeah, one last thing to add to that I really like. I feel bad for the guy, but Ryan Shazier's injury. Last year they had an average defense, but without him, that defense takes a huge hit. He was an unbelievably talented player, and without him, that defense struggled tremendously. Just look at the Patriots game. They put up like 40 points on them or something like that. They just destroyed them once Shazier was gone.
Yeah, 505 passing yards in that game for Tom Brady.
That's crazy. Yeah. So I think that actually bodes well for him, that defense, I don't really trust him this year. So now we'll move on. We can talk about our next guy, Allen Hurns.
Yeah, my next pick for sleeper is Allen Hurns. Now, a lot of people are down on this Cowboys offensive passing game this year. They lost Dez Bryant. They let him go to free agency, but they let him go for a reason. They drafted Michael Gallup in the draft. Now, Allen Hurns, 6'3", 201 pounds, went as an undrafted free agent to the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2014. Now, he came out and he's had some injury issues. He's had some hamstring, things like that. High ankle sprain last year shut him down for the season. And the Jacksonville Jaguars really brought up some of those other young guys like Keelan Cole and D.D. Westbrook to kind of fill in that role. But if you remember, in his second season in the NFL, Allen Hurns had over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns with a quarterback like Blake Bortles. Now, the same season, Allen Robinson, also as the #1 guy, had double-digit touchdowns. So moving from Blake Bortles to Dak Prescott, who many would say is a much improved upgrade at quarterback, Allen Hurns looks to be the #1 wide receiver there, unless Michael Gallup can show some things in the preseason, which we haven't really seen any reports of that yet. Allen Hurns seems to be the #1 guy. They gave him a 2-year deal worth up to $12 million in Dallas. And that offensive line is amazing. If people decide to stack the box, you got to remember they have Ezekiel Elliott there. They stack the box, Hurns gets out in the open, and Dak Prescott's got a guy to throw to. Now, he hasn't had great seasons with totals of 39 receptions, 64 receptions, and then the last 2 years only 35 and 39. But if he were to play the entire season for the last 2 seasons, you extend out his receptions, he'd be looking at 70 to 80 receptions and anywhere from 800 to 1100 receiving yards. So being as where he's being drafted, one of the big things we talk about is average draft position. Like I said, not a lot of people are high on the Cowboys offense this year, and where Allen Hurns is being drafted, he could slide into that wide receiver 3 role, as we've talked about in standard leagues, possibly even wide receiver 2 with the quarterback play of Prescott if he were to have a bounce back season. So I have Allen Hurns up in the top 30 for my rankings.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a sleeper candidate, no doubt.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty solid. That's interesting. We'll see how he plays out there for sure. All right, so now I'm going to talk about my last guy, Mike Williams.
Love this guy.
He's a guy that there isn't a whole lot to say about him. Like, I couldn't find much on him because he didn't play last year, and this is kind of difficult. But we'll talk about this. First of all, I like that he's playing for the Chargers with the lack of weapons. They lost Gates, they lost Henry. Really, other than Keenan Allen, he's the next guy up. He's the second target for Phillip Rivers. You just talked about Phillip Rivers. You're absolutely right about Phillip Rivers' fantasy value. I think he's an all right quarterback, though. I think he's an average or above average quarterback, so I think that's bodes well for him, that he's not working with some rookie or some guy that struggled throughout his whole career. As far as the talent goes, they rave about his speed, his ability to stretch the field, to go up and get balls. They say he's got great hands. There's a reason he was a first-round, 7th overall draft pick. They love this guy. I really love the way that he complements across from Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's a big PPR guy. Not huge on touchdowns or yards, but he gets a lot of catches. He's a very talented wide receiver. And then Mike Williams is the opposite of that, really. He's stretch the field, lots of yards, make big plays. That's sort of what he does with his speed. So I really like him for that. I think he's going to have a great season. Again, that first round 7th overall pick, I think, says a lot about him. We didn't see him play last year because of his injury. That's the thing. He's back practicing, and they say that he looks very healthy and that's not a concern, which is great news as well. So that's I think he's going to have an awesome year.
You know, I like him too. I think the biggest thing is we always say watch the preseason. We don't want to overvalue the preseason. Obviously, if a rookie, or not a rookie, but a veteran goes out there and he struggles, Le'Veon Bell, I mentioned to him, he might miss a preseason. Doesn't matter. He's going to be fine. But the preseason is great to monitor guys that are coming back from injuries or young players like rookies. And I think he's a guy that you got to watch and keep an eye on. And if he's healthy, and it sounds like he is, he could have a huge year.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now we'll move on. We can talk about our next guy. We'll just keep going. Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, so my final guy here is Tyler Lockett. His average draft position, he's not even ranked the top 60 wide receivers taken in most mock drafts, which is crazy. I find it hard to believe he's not even sneaking up in the top 60 in many mock drafts. Look back at his rookie year. He was electric his rookie season. His rookie year came out at 51 catches, 664 receiving yards, and 6 TDs. And then he added 2 more additional TDs in punt and kick returns. So this guy was electric as a rookie year. So heading into 2016, he was a guy that people were very high on, but he struggled to stay healthy that year. He slowed by a knee injury. And then he sustained a compound fracture in his right leg at the end of his second season, and that hindered him going into last year. So he's just been dealing with a lot of injuries. Coach Pete Carroll believes that Lockett's leg is finally all the way back to 100% healthy. Now, he went on to say that Lockett played all 16 games last year, but he admits that he was never quite right. Last year was a struggle for him, Carroll said. Throughout the season, he was not able to do things he did in the past. So he's back at it. He's really playing fast. There's no restrictions of any kind and no lingering effects of the surgery that he had last year since he's been hurt. Now, Paul Richardson, the wide receiver there, has moved on to Washington, and that really opens up the opportunity for Lockett to become the number 2 wide receiver there. Also, Jimmy Graham left. Last year Jimmy Graham didn't have a great year, but he had 10 touchdowns. So some of those targets and touchdowns are going to fall, I believe, to Tyler Lockett. He's healthy. Another huge boost for this guy is Seattle lost a lot of players on defense. They're going to take a step back. That defense is going to struggle. That offense is going to be asked. They're going to be asked more to do more to win games. So they're going to have to put up a lot of more points to win, unlike in the past where that defense could win games for them. And another thing that I like about the situation that he's in, a guy like Tyler Lockett, who's fast, who a speedster going down the field. Oftentimes, players like him benefit from quarterbacks that can scramble by time in the pocket so they can get past the safeties and get deep. Wilson's that type of quarterback. We saw it last year with Watson and Will Fuller. Watson was able to scramble by time, and a lot of those deep balls they had allowed him to get deep into coverage there past the coverage. So I think all these things bode well for him to rebound and have a really good year. I can't believe this guy is not even the top 60 in most mock drafts.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's one thing that we talked about before we started the video here is that the defense, they've lost a lot of guys on defense, and they're going to be asked to do a lot of passing. There's going to be quite a few things for Russell Wilson to do. Actually, I had to move him up, and Tyler Lockett was one of the guys that I really liked this year as one of my sleepers. So I completely agree with that. And, the injuries, assuming health, he's going to have a great year. And realistically, what did they bring in? They brought in Brandon Marshall. He's a 34-year-old guy. He's had 3 touchdowns in the last 161 targets, and he's just not really finding the end zone. So guys like Tyler Lockett are going to be asked to step up and do a lot more, and he's got the talent to do it.
Yeah, that running game is terrible. That defense is terrible. Somebody's got to do something besides Doug Baldwin there.
Offensive line is terrible.
So it's going to be pretty much the Russell Wilson super show. Can he throw for 400 yards? Because otherwise they're not going to be able to win any games. But so yeah, I think he could. He might be, honestly, in my honest opinion, he might be the best sleeper we talked about in this video. I think he could just explode. But that is if he can stay healthy. All right, so now Ryan's up. But Marquise Lee.
Marquise Lee, yeah, Jacksonville Jaguars, 2014 second-round pick. He is 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. This year, he's moving into the number 1 wide receiver role. He played that role a little bit last year with Alan Hurns being injured. And like I said, they love their young wide receivers. They have D.D. Westbrook. They have Keelan Cole there. They drafted D.J. Chark this year. They also brought in Dante Moncrief. Moncrief has really been one of those guys that he's been hit or miss throughout his year. Kind of had yo-yo type of games where one game he'd be great, the next game he'd be a little bit down. So with Marquise Lee, he's going to be 27 this year. He's still a really young guy. He goes up, he gets the ball. He ran a 4.44 unofficial time in the 40, so he's quick. The only issue that I really see is that he's got Blake Bortles as his quarterback. But if you take a look at last year, once Blake Bortles started to kind of target Marquise Lee, Lee went on a stretch of 7 consecutive games with 5 receptions or more. And also he had 70 yards or more for 4 consecutive games. So it's one of those stretches where, yeah, they're not the greatest numbers, but at the same time, it's consistency that really is the key for me. And with Leonard Fournette being there, defenses are going to have to focus on Fournette. So Bortles kind of improved towards the end of the season, which is really what got them into the AFC Championship game. He, down the stretch, was really making good decisions and smart decisions, not really throwing those interceptions and having the turnovers. So if Bortles continues to look Marquise Lee's way, and now that he's got the weapons on the other side to kind of balance things out, and Leonard Fournette back there to make defenses focus on him, Lee's going to have quite an amazing season. I see him going over 1,000 yards for the first time in his career, and possibly in the 7 to 8 touchdown range with at least 80 receptions.
Yeah, I think sometimes we overthink things. I think he's got a bad quarterback, or maybe he's not the most talented, but I think he's probably going to be the number 1 guy in Jacksonville, and the number 1 receiver, that's enough to give him some fantasy value, and I think a lot of people are overlooking that.
Yeah, some guys are good simply on volume plays,
They actually they gave him number 1 guy money this year. They extended him for 4 more years and another $38 million, so he's definitely got the backing of the team. He just needs to make sure that the quarterback play is where it needs to be, and he should be definitely a solid fantasy receiver this year.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are some sleepers we think you need to keep an eye on. We'll watch, monitor. We're going to come up probably with another sleeper video. We're going to do some things like guys trending upwards, guys to avoid. We want to hear from you guys. One, who are your sleepers? Who do you have somebody that you're keeping your eye on out there? We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Go ahead and subscribe, get the word out there, comment, like. Continue to help us to grow this site. We love whatever feedback you give us. Thanks for joining us again at the Fantasy Football Profits. God bless and have a good day.